Are you asking me how much creative scope do I have in my job?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm never told no.
Okay.
One of the big things, one thing that is quite enjoyable at playing, working for the Athletic is I'm never told no. It's always yes, or how long do you think that would take, or can you prove it?
Yeah.
And the can you prove it is always the fun bit. So I'd say, my average morning, I wake up 7, 8, lol, no. I wake up, I cry, I stare at the wall after I have a shower. I go, why? Why am I in England? Watch the news for a bit, read the paper, check football stats, see what people are talking about in various online spaces. I'd say around about somewhere between the hours of 9 and 10. If I don't have to do a podcast early morning, sometime between the hours of 9 and 10, I'll call the mothership. I'll talk to my editor. The editor will go, this is what we think is going on and will be an interesting topic of conversation for Manchester United. What do you think is being said in Manchester that could also be worth it? And then I'll go, here are my ideas. They never say no. They say yes, no. Maybe we should write that at a later date so it'll be more of interest. Or they say, can you prove it? Now, the can you prove it is sometimes the can you prove it comes from stats. Sometimes you've got to go into the Opta deep dive, talk to a statistician, get a heat map out, look up XG, go on FBref. Sometimes the can you prove it is you call up that person's first ever football club, you find their first ever football coach. Sometimes that can you prove it is you get in contact with someone's football agent and you get in touch with someone else's football agent and you get in touch with the football club. Sometimes the can you prove it requires you to get on a train and go somewhere in the country and meet people and talk to them and get their opinion on something. But in terms of creative scope, I'd say I've done 3 or 4 things that you wouldn't typically see in a British newspaper. And that's not because a British newspaper thinks just thinks differently. I'd say because there are just certain articles that can't fit in a tabloid. I think if you read something like the Daily Mirror, the back page has to get across sometimes a very complex footballing idea in less than 200 words. Whereas sometimes I will go into a conversation and go, this topic needs me to write something that's 2,000 words long. I want to say in early 2021, where a very nice Manchester United fan went, Carl, can you please explain to me what does Fred do? And I said, okay, this will take nearly 3,000 words. And I went, what? It will just take nearly 3,000 words. And that's something you can do in online media because it doesn't cost extra printing paper to explain that. And I use loads of stats. I also use some historical references based on Brazilian football. I use loads of screenshots because I watched a bunch of old football games involving Fred, where he did good things and where he did not so good things and whatnot. And that's the creative scope and whatnot. It's the thing of, you can ask me a football question and how I choose to answer that can be 3 or 4 different things based on how much time I've got to hand that in.
Yeah.
And what medium you want. If you ask me right now, explain how Gareth Southgate's England work, I can give you an answer that's 50 words long. I can also give you an answer that's 5,000 words long. And it depends on, when do you want it handed in by, and do you want it in audio form, or do you want it in written form, or do you want it in video form, or do you want it in illustrated form?
The fact that you're doing this in so many variety of the media as well goes to show how. Do you have to be trained in a certain way to actually do it, or is it just like, yeah, I can do it in any way because naturally?
Everything requires training. Think about this one, man. There was a point in time where you didn't know how to use a knife and fork.
That is true.
Everything requires training. Everything requires iteration. And the way I describe things now is different to the way I described things a year ago, because that you improve incrementally. You learn what your audience responds well to. You learn what you respond well to in terms of your own creative craft. There was a point in time, I'd say in the second half of last season, where someone in the comment section of The Athletic said, Carl, really like your pieces, you really explain things really well, but you do have this habit of describing things as good to great, or describing things as okay to good. And he goes, it's a bit jarring when you read 2 or 3 of your articles in a row. Could you change that? And I said, that's a really good point. The reason I do good to great is because a lot of things at Manchester United at the time existed in a spectrum, or like very, very across a spectrum. But I can understand that I've probably used this phrase 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 weeks. I will try and find a different way to describe this. Thank you for the heads up. So that's just like a different iteration there. You also have to understand that how you write football in August is always different to how you write football in December, which is different to how you write football in March. Because in August, you're very predictive. The majority of the things you're writing at the start of the season these are things that might happen.
Yeah.
This is what Arsenal are playing good right now. Could they make the top 4? And then you get to December and go, Arsenal are in the top 4 places. Here's what they need to do to stay there. And then you get to March, and let's say Arsenal's still there. You go, here's what, and then you're writing more almost in response to things that have happened in the later season. You go, here's what Arsenal did to stay in the top 4. I don't know if you've seen many Manchester United press conferences, but something I often do is I will ask a manager a question at a press conference. I will take note of that answer, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, I will go, hello, Mr. Manager. I asked you this in 3 weeks ago. I'm going to ask you the same question now. What's changed? And some managers find that some managers often respond to that well, because they go, thank you for paying attention to something I said. I can actually explain my methods here. Now, that is a sort of question that I can do because I work online. That's not something that you can put into a pithy 50-word answer or a short sentence that, say, someone who works for a newspaper does. That's not me saying I'm better than a newspaper person. That's just me saying, here is the way I write. Here is the things I need to do for that forum. And here's the questions that I now ask to fill that thing. Whereas a newspaper person or a radio person may ask a different question.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how you do it that way. And that's how you improve over time.